A very warm welcome to all of you to this webinar called Ready to Move from Disconnected Systems to Integrated Workflows. Before we start, I will just briefly mention the house rules. So by default, all of you participating are muted. The Q&A panel is open, so feel free to ask any questions you might have during the session. The webinar will be recorded and will be available on demand as well after this webinar from our webpage. And last, please fill out the survey after the webinar. So with that said, I will just briefly present myself. I'm René. I am responsible for the NTI Group software unit, meaning that I'm leading the software development of our IP products, and with that also our solution concepts, both within the building and the manufacturing industry. I've been a part of NTI the last 16 years. I'm based in Denmark, and I have experience as a system consultant, a solution architect, and I've also been leading the consultancy business within the manufacturing area as well. And since 2023, I've been leading our software unit in NTI Group. And with me today, I have my colleague Morten, so I will just briefly hand over to him for him to present himself. Go ahead, Morten.
Yeah, thank you, René. Yeah, my name is Morten Benner Rolsgaard, and I'm the product manager of our manufacturing products. So yeah, I'm responsible for the vision and mission of these products, and I have been at NTI for almost 5 years, and also been working as a system consultant and a solution architect. Yeah, now I'm also placed in Denmark as well.
Great, thank you so much, Morten. So I've like really been looking forward to this webinar for many reasons. We have actually had several webinars this year covering our manufacturing products. But today we will focus on the NTI integrator and everything that comes with that platform. So the content of this webinar will first of all be an overall presentation of NTI. It will also be for me to talk about the different solution concepts and solution approaches you can have using our products and our concepts. And afterwards, I will hand over to Morten for him to talk about common data collaboration, but also the core features of NTI Integrator, and for Morten as well to provide examples of integrations and solutions examples. So this is the overall contents or the agenda for the webinar. So what we do, first of all, we are a leading full service supplier of digital solutions, both for the construction, design, manufacturing, and media entertainment industries. And we are as well an Autodesk Platinum partner. Today, NTI is based in 13 countries. 12 of the countries is in the European region. We are plus 900 employees. What you see here is actually the landscape of NTI as it looks today. So just to cover what our customers are all about. So we help companies ranging from small companies to large global enterprise companies. And our customers, they include everything from design firms, engineering, plant and process companies, just to mention a few. And our customers are all ambitious with a desire to succeed and innovate in an efficient and sustainable way. And we, NTI, provide solution concepts that ensure quality in data with an automated and secure approach within engineering, manufacturing, CAM and plant. So specifically for the manufacturing area, we have developed or established what we call the Evolver Suite. The Evolver Suite is actually the suite covering the products designed for this specific area. And that covers everything from how you create data, how you prepare your data, but also how you collaborate with your data. So everything from the beginning to the end is covered by these products. And just to give you a brief overview how this product landscape looks like, we first of all have NTI for Inventor, which is basically an add-in for Autodesk Inventor. It comes in two different flavors, NTI for Inventor Professional and Essential. It's basically the same product. It's just the license type that decides the amount of functionality available in the product. And this product will ensure how you create data, it will ensure the quality in the creation of the data as well. Alongside with that, we have NTI for Vault. And NTI for Vault basically comes in 3 different flavors. It comes with a flavor for the Autodesk Vault client, both for Vault Office, but also for Vault Professional. And it comes in NTI for Vault Job, which basically is an extension to the Autodesk Vault job processor. So these 2 products were actually covered in our previous webinars. And those webinars are actually available from our websites on demand as well. So if you didn't attend those webinars, I will definitely recommend you to see those. Alongside with these 2 products brands, we have the NTI Configurator, which basically is a web-based configurator where you as a company can perform product configuration. It could be for your sales organizations, it could be for your sales agents, it could also be from an internal, where you can configure products, you can request quotes, collaborate with your ERP systems, PLM system. So it's basically cover everything related to product configuration. And in the end, we have our NTI Integrator. And this is actually what this webinar today will focus on. The integrator comes with actually modules that you could put on top of the platform, like an ERP connector, make you capable of connecting to a broad range of ERP systems, but also a PLM connector, being capable of connecting to User Manage from Autodesk, but also a lot of other PLM systems. Just like the NTI for Inventor comes in different flavors, we also have an essential version of the Integrator, which basically is the same as the full one. It's just the license type that decide what in specific you have available of functionality. And as the last product, we have the Integrator client, which is installed on top of Vault, Autodesk Vault, where you from Vault can interact with the integrator as a user. So this is the product landscape of Evolve Suite. So with all of those products in your hands, we could actually create a lot of different solution concepts or solution levels. So here I've just have mentioned 3 to 4 random levels. So if you take the first level, this is the lowest level of what I consider as a solution. So this is where you as a user might have Inventor, might use Vault Basic, maybe just a network share to handle data, maybe AutoCAD, but also NTI for Inventor, Essential. So this is where you as a user will work with a manual approach, meaning that you will have a good control of ensuring unique file naming. You will have a uniform way of publishing your data, but also to how you create data in regard to properties handling. So this will actually ensure some kind of quality in your data. And on level 2, you could have a more event-based approach of how you work on a daily basis in your solution. So this is where NTI for Inventor Professional comes into play, which basically does the same as level 1. It will just enable you to collaborate, creating bill of materials from your Inventor, but also have event-based approach, like create PDFs when you check into Vault, when you save a file, a lot of other things. And on the last 2 levels, we have the more extended level where you begin to have a more automated approach, meaning that you will maybe create your design representation files like PDF, DXF, step files on a lifecycle state change inside Vault and use the job processor to process your data. And this kind of solution we will have a combination of our IP products like NTI for Mentor Professional, NTI for Client, and NTI for Job. And on the last level, we will have the more integrated approach where we are initializing our NTI integrator, integrating to ERP, PLM, SharePoint, Autodesk Construction Cloud, could be many different platforms. And actually, and this is actually where Morten will provide you today, is also to give you examples of how the integrator can be initialized on some of the lower levels. So I'm actually looking forward to that. In our previous webinar, it was actually on September 13th, we talked about NTI for Vault. And we also talked about what you need to pay attention to considering vaults. And I'm a technician, so I can pretty easily call myself having focus on only the software applications. But if you just forget about software for a moment and just look at a random department like an R&D department, an engineering department, and just consider what is actually surrounding that. It could be the production, it could be installation side, it could also be your ERP system, your service department, could be a PLM system, or your sales department. Could be many others like SharePoint, whatever. But what is common for all of these is that you could ask yourself a few questions to identify how you will collaborate and how you will ensure that the correct data is handed over to those. So first of all, what needs to be delivered? You could also ask yourself, when should it be delivered? And how should it be delivered? And where can it be accessed? So in the previous webinar, we addressed the what and when, and today we will address the how and where. So I guess that all of you attending can relate to this slide. So this could actually be a random manufacturing company where a lot of things is handled with mails, it's a manual approach. Everything is just handled in a manual or semi-automatic way between different departments. And it actually works. All of you is a living proof of that. But what if we imagine the opposite, like the perfect world of integration? Everything is just provided seamlessly between different departments using integrations. How would that look like? And what would the impact in your organization be, transforming from a manual approach to a more automatic, and with that also a more secure and integrated approach, because that will have an impact on your organization. So how you initialize the data between all this, it can actually be handled with a manual approach, like someone press a button, and when you press that button, something will happen, like publish a PDF file or extract data from one system to another. It could also be semi-automatic, like event-based. So when you check into Vault, when you save a file inside Inventor, if you do something that initialize some kind of event, that can actually initialize data being handed over from one system to another, like from Vault to ERP, or Vault to PLM, or PLM to ERP, doesn't matter. And last, the automatic approach, which also is the most secure approach, where you, as an example, on a lifecycle state transition inside Vault, can initialize the data is extracted from Vault to another system. And all of these approaches can actually be a part of an integrated approach and platform. So why NTI Integrator? Yeah, first of all, it will integrate design, engineering, and business systems to a unified platform supporting like Vault from Autodesk, Future Manage, SharePoint, Autodesk Construction Cloud, and ERP systems, just to mention a few systems. It will also help you transforming your PDM data into business system ready information for seamless cross-platform communication. like it can actually negotiate between systems and ensure that data is actually transformed and handled correctly before it is handed over to the next system. And this is actually where a bidirectional integration come into play. It can also automate workflows to boost efficiency and data quality, while it also reduces the handling of the manual approach. So this is where you really can become efficient. This is a matter of you to always be capable of relying on your data, no matter in which system you are accessing. And it will, of course, drive the digitalization by eliminating the manual interfaces and inconsistent data, and it actually enables you to focus on innovation and engineering. And it will solve issues like manual entry, version conflicts, and duplicates that lead to inefficiency and errors. And last, it supports standardized processes, structures, and data flows across the organization through full system integration. So this is just a few of the arguments why the NCI integrator is a good idea, and you as a company should focus on a more integrated approach of how you work on a daily basis. And with that said, I will hand over to my colleague Morten for him to give you a more technical view of the NCI integrator. So go ahead, Morten.
Thank you, René. So yeah, I will dig a little bit deeper into the integrator itself, how it works. So I will talk a little bit about integration in general. What kind of tendencies do we see in the market, and then I will go to the NCI integrator itself and talk about the core features, and then bring some examples showing one-to-one integration or direct integration, as you may call it, where we just transfer data, and then this two-way integration or bidirectional integration, where we actually also make the data accessible in different systems, and maybe even start integrating not only one way but several ways. And then we will just finish off by talking a little bit about how do we do these projects, how do we approach it. Yeah. So let me just show you these concepts levels just to sum up, and as René promised, then I would like to emphasize that we do not need to be at level 4 necessarily before we start looking into integrating our systems. So this could actually start all the way down on the first level, where we don't necessarily have a lot of different systems, but we may have some processes and some systems that are suitable, that are mature enough for integrating our data. So we don't have to use Excel sheets and emails for everything. So we don't have to be on a level 3 ready to go to the level 4 and the integrated solution before we start looking at integrations. Yeah. So what we see at our customers, almost at all our customers, is the different ways of transferring data. And I believe that some of you will recognize these methods, where maybe we have a piece of paper, we need to put that into an Excel sheet, in some way digitalize it. We exchange data by emails, maybe even Teams messages, and also files sent back and forth through emails, and maybe even having several systems on different screens, and working in board, but we need to access some data in our ERP system. So in order to do whatever we need to do in our native system, we need to see something in our ERP system or PLM system, maybe the CRM system, to access some quotes, what has been agreed upon, and so on. So what we want to do here is to use the systems for its purpose. All the systems have some specific purposes, something that they excel in, and we want to use the systems within these areas. And then instead of sitting in 3 different systems, we want to be very good at being in one, and then just access only the data that we need to proceed with our work, and not not being an expert in 3 different systems. So if we look at the value chain, a typical value chain at some of our customers, then maybe we have some sales, or we have some sales very often. Maybe they use a CRM system. Then we have some engineering in the PDM system, and some ERP, maybe some production, or at least some suppliers that we need to collaborate with, and also some service. And all these different parts of the value chain may have a system that they work within. And if we look at these processes, such as the document, the product documentation, specifications, the sales clarifications with the quotes and order handling, and project management, change management, and even supplier collaboration, these processes, they overlap when we look at the silos within the company or the value chain. So what we want here is to have an integrated approach when we are doing these processes. So whatever system we are working within, then we should be able to access the needed data to proceed in our process. So in sales, we might need some information regarding the engineering, and in engineering, we might need some data regarding the sales, and so on. So this is just to really to illustrate that all the processes that we work with in our daily work, they overlap in these silos that we have in our value chain if we don't work with an integrated approach. And this is what we want to work on today, and this is how we can use some tools in the NTI integrator. And the reason why we do this, of course, the first of all, we can improve the cooperation across the value chain. So we don't have to stand up, walk all the way over to our procurement to ask about something in order to proceed with our work, but we have a very good cooperation between the departments. We can also improve on the data quality with these automated workflows. So we don't have to rely on some manual function that the user needs to do something to proceed with the process. We can actually rely on the automated workflows, and we can also rely on the data quality in these workflows. And then by standardizing our processes, we can also avoid duplicate data. So very often we have some data in an Excel sheet and then the same data in a system, and it's the same data. We just need to enter it twice. And then one of the very important ones here regarding the integrator is that it also allows us to build in rules and experience some of the logic that we have, maybe for our projects, maybe for our products itself. We can build those into the processes. So we don't have to rely on our memory and our experience, but we can actually build that in to the processes itself. And all in all, that should provide us with some more time for value-adding work, which is also more fun, I guess, for everyone, instead of these trivial tasks. And then the NTI integrator. I would like to just, paint the field here and explain a little bit about what is it and how does it work? What are the limitations? And to illustrate that, we have the NTI integrator here in the middle of our IT infrastructure. And here we have put a lot of different applications and software around the integrator. So you can see in the left side, for example, we have some different on-premise and cloud applications that you might know, such as Google Drive and SharePoint, File Explorer. And then we also have some Autodesk cloud products in the top, such as the application platform service, Autodesk Platform Services, which is the one that we use for the NTI configurator. We also have Fusion Manage, and which is the PLM system, and ACC, and a lot of other different stuff. We have some Autodesk on-premise software in the bottom, such as Inventor, Vault, Plant. And then in the right, we have all these various systems that you definitely have a lot of different systems when we look at the different customers. So you will all have some different ERP systems, maybe CRM systems, and much more. And the point here is to illustrate that the limitation and also the possibilities within this are related to this API. And for those who don't know what an API is, then it's an application programming interface. And what that means is just a language, a programming language that we can use to talk to a specific system. So most ERP systems, I would say all modern ERP systems, have a programming language that we can use to do different stuff inside the ERP system. Vault also has an API that we can use to do a lot of different stuff, and so on for all these systems. So that is the requirement in order to use the integrator. That is that we have an API, and luckily that is the case in, I would say, 99% of the time. And the integrator is on premise, so it's the closed environment. It's not that we have to transfer our data into the cloud all the time. Of course, if we communicate with cloud applications, then it will be in cloud. But otherwise, it's an on-premise server application. So in regards to safety, it's also very, very, very good. So that's how the architecture looks overall for the integrator. And then when we look at what we call a transaction, so a transaction in our world is just a term for transferring data from one place to another, one system to another system. And as you can see here, I have tried to illustrate this very overall. So we have a source system, and what we want, the purpose of all this, is to transfer some data to a target system. And this data could be, it most likely is, some properties. It could also be a bill of material, if it's from Vault, for example. Could also be some documents, some PDF files, step files, and whatever we can imagine. And in the source system, we want to trigger this integration somehow. We can do that in various ways. That could be a right-click menu, a button, or it could be on a lifecycle state change. So when we put something in a release state, then we also want the integrator to be triggered and to transfer this data from our source system to our target system. So this is just to settle some terms as well, that I will mention these things a few times. The target system could, of course, be anything, really. ERP system, PLM system, or Vault, for example. And by using the integrator, so we consider the integrator more of a platform than a product. And we have a lot of different things that we can do inside the integrator. And the first thing that we will handle is the properties. So the properties need to be defined. What properties do we need to transfer? And then on our way of handling the properties, we can also validate the values of all the properties. We can change them or add properties on the fly during the integration. And we can also connect to external sources, meaning that we can access, for example, an Excel file, a database, a web, do a web call to look up something to handle our properties. So we don't have to do that inside our source system, but we can do it on the fly during the integration. And then in the middle of this, we can enter a preparation state. And this is optional. And what it means is that we can present our data that we are going to transfer in a table view. And by this, it's kind of a middle step where we stop the integration, and then we can make sure that everything is in order. And I guess some of you will recognize this solution, as many of you probably already have some sort of an integration where you, for example, dump a file on a share, and then you read that file with the ERP system software, for example. And then it will be presented in some kind of sheet where you can verify it and you can manipulate it before you push it further on into the target system. And I will also show an example of this, because this is a feature in the integrator that we can use as standard. And then finally here, so in the integrator, we have these visual workflows that we can execute, and this is where we actually push the data to the target system. But in the meantime, in these workflows, we can do a lot of different stuff using these standard actions, as we call it. And I also have an example of that, a small video where you can see how we move around with this visual workflow. And I think that is where we really, really differ between having a product, a platform, compared to having a custom solution that is basically just code. So that's looking forward to show that. And so in order to use the integrator, as I said, there are different ways of doing that. And it also works very well with our other product, NTI for Vault. So now this is just an example of how a workflow can look. And this is the one we used in our previous webinar. So some of you might recognize it. But this could be anything. This is from Vault, but it could be anything really where we can trigger some code on a transition of some sort. In this case, we can use NTI for Vault client to make a manual trigger, meaning that we can, for example, right-click on a file or on an item, and then say, I want to push this data to the integrator. And if we want an automatic approach, we can use NTI for Vault job and then let the job processor trigger the integrator. And that could be used so when we put a file or item in the release state, then it will automatically trigger the integrator to transfer this data. So that would be a fully automatic approach. And then I will go to the core features of the NTI integrator. You will of course also see these as they are inside the UI. But I consider these core features in 4 different categories. And some of those have different purposes. So there is some overlap in this. But overall, we look at some features that are used for data validation. So that could be a property mapping, where we make sure that our property values are in a certain quality. We can put in rules and conditions to say that we only want to transfer this data if the quality is well enough. Also, if the data types are correct. And then we have this preparation feature where we can present all the data that we are going to push into the target system and validate it before we push it to the target system. We can also manipulate our data. We have some features with that purpose. So we can look up, for example, we can look up in external databases and then convert our data to something else based on a lookup. And we can use scripts, we can use web calls, translations, all kind of tools to manipulate with our data if we want to. Of course, that's optional. And then, of course, we have some integration features. And once again, we talk about transactions. And in the integrator, we will have a list of transactions. So we can actually show all the transactions that have happened in a log. And we can also see the workflows that each transaction has went through. So everything is logged. And then we have these standard actions. And as René also mentioned, we have these connectors, ERP connectors and PLM connectors. And these supply us with different standard actions. And I will also elaborate on that in another slide. And then we can do different API calls. So that means that one thing is going from a source system to a target system, but the workflow in the meantime, doing the integration, we can also do different API calls and execute different scripts to do basically whatever we can imagine using an API and the scripts. And then finally, we have these accessibility features. So what I mean by that is making data accessible across the systems. So as I said earlier, maybe we need some information from the ERP system, even though we are working in Vault, for example. So it would be very nice if we could present this data that I need all the time in order to make my decisions on a daily basis. If I could just present those in Vault instead of going to another system that I'm not that familiar with and search for different information. We can also send emails to expose this integration and the data to someone outside the company or inside the company, depends on the settings. And then once again, the preparation, that's also a way of making the data accessible before we execute the integration. And then, of course, the integrator itself also has an API. So we can actually do whatever we want with the integrator, more or less. Using the API, we can trigger it from anywhere. So we can also trigger the integrator from inside the ERP system and turn this workflow around, meaning that we go from the ERP system to Vault if that is the need. That's no issue. And then, as I said, we log everything. So we have an event log, so it's very transparent what is going on, when, who did it. All that is logged in in the transaction logs and in event logs inside the integrator. Yeah, so the first feature here to elaborate is the properties mapping. So this is how it looks inside the integrator. We have a table view of all the properties. So we simply specify the properties here. We have the source properties, and then we have some properties that are the ones we're going to transfer to into the target system. So if we take the first one up here, the category and the category name, we can see that in our source system, in this case, it's vault to an ERP system. And in this case, the property is called category name in vault, but in the ERP system, it's called category. So we have a very, very straightforward overview of the properties. What are the properties in our target system, and what are they in the source system? And so this is how we map them together, just by putting them in the same row. And then we have different ways of validating and manipulating these properties. So the first one here is, do we allow the property to be empty, for example? So this can be very, very beneficial if the ERP system has certain requirements in regards to the fields. It may not allow an empty field inside the ERP system, so we can just handle that in the integration. Instead of going to change a lot of data in our source system, we can just change it on the fly here. And in this case, we allow the category name to be empty, but we want a default value because that is what the ERP system accepts, which is just a dash in this case. But it could also be the next one, the content center property, where it's either true or false. It's never something else. So no value in the source system may mean that it's not a content center component in the ERP system. And further on, we can also do these lookups for each property. So just as an example, once again, this category name. So in the source system, we expect to receive a category name called assembly or part or sheet metal, but we don't allow that in the ERP system. So we want to translate this, so to say, or look up another value. So if we receive the value assembly, then we want to transfer the value product. So we don't really have to consider this in vault, but we consider it in the integration instead. Furthermore, this one can also, this is just a static list of lookups, but it can actually also connect to an external source. So it could be that we have this long list of lookup values in an Excel file or in a SQL database or something else. And if this is not enough, then we can do a lot of different stuff in the scripts. And in this case, as you can see here, we have a mass property, and the mass property we receive has a decimal separator with a comma, but the ERP system only accepts it with a dot. So this is one way of using the scripts to manipulate the data, the value of this property. And we can do that, of course, for each property. So this is the last tool that we use if we cannot do it with the other ones. So here we can basically do whatever we need to do with the properties to ensure the right data quality before we transfer the properties to the target system. Yeah, and so the workflow, this is how the workflow looks. And as you can see here, in this case, this simple example, we just come from Vault, and on the release date, we trigger the NTI integrator. And then what happens inside the integrator is that we run through, first of all, the property mapping, but then afterwards, we enter this processing workflow, as it's called. And as you can see in the top, we have the start block, and then we have all these blocks down connected by arrows. This is a very visual way of illustrating the workflow and explaining what happens. And each of these blocks are called actions. So the actions are positioned in the right here. This is our library of actions that we can select and then put in the workflow to customize this workflow so it is exactly as you need. And actually, there are several layers in such a workflow here. So one thing is the overall workflow that we see here, but we also enter a specific workflow for the item itself, for the properties, the metadata of this item that we are going to either create or update. And I will explain a little bit further, but this is just to explain that the whole package that we receive from, for example, Vault, will be handled in different segments. So one thing is the metadata, the item itself, but then in the next workflow here called the structure workflow, we can handle the bill of material separately. So here we handle all the bump rows in a bill of material if it's relevant. And then finally, we also handle all the documents separately, meaning that if we if we transfer a PDF file or another file, then it will be handled separately in this document workflow, where we can attach it to the item that we created earlier in the workflow. So this is just to show how we have a very visual way of configuring these workflows. And also it's very transparent. So in the log file, we can see each action, what has happened. And in case of an error, then we can also see straight away where it went wrong. And then now that we mentioned these actions, then I just want to also mention the connectors, as René also promised. So this is the current list of connectors that we have. And the connectors is just a extension to the integrator, so it does not require any additional work, basically. What's important to say is that it's not a limitation, so we don't need the connector in order to integrate to an ERP system or a PLM system. We can do it anyway, but the connector makes our lives a little bit easier. And as you can see here, we have a variety of connectors already, and we are of course developing these continuously. So right now there's a construction cloud connector on its way, but if you have any questions regarding your own ERP system or PLM systems, then please just ask, because we also listen, of course, to our customers, what are the needs out there. So an example of this is the finance and operation connector. So as you can see here, we have in the middle these actions, and a lot of these are just the default actions that we have in all our configurations. But then we have an additional tab because we have installed this connector with some actions that are only relevant for this specific ERP system, the finance and operation application. So this supplies us with some more standard actions that we can put in the workflow and then create a specific workflow only for that system. And it also makes the authentication part a lot more easy for everyone. So basically, we just need some basic information, and then we are ready to connect to the system. Instead of, so this is very often the headache of making these ERP connections in order to be authenticated correctly. But with a connector, it's straightforward. So these connectors brings a lot of value, I would say. And then if we go a little bit further into such a workflow, so this is an article workflow where we handle the item itself. So we don't handle the bill of material and we don't handle the documents. That will be in another workflow, but here we handle the item itself. So if we have an item in Vault, we would have a equivalent item in, for example, the ERP system or vice versa. And as you can see here, we of course start in the top in the green start block, and then we have the option to kind of make like this a tree view in our workflow. So we can go in different paths depending on the properties that we have received. So in this case, we look at a certain property called configurator ID to see if it's present. Is it empty or is it not? And so here the red arrow and the green arrows don't indicate right or wrong. It's more one outcome and another outcome. So depending on this property value, we go either the green way or the red way. And the next one, no matter what, we will look if this item exists in the target system. So this is also a very, very common way of setting this up, that of course, if the item already exists, we don't want to create a new item. We just need to update the existing item. So this is the next step. Depending on the result in this item exist action, then we either create the item or we update the item. And so in this way, we can make quite a big workflow where we go at different paths depending on the transaction, on the data inside the transaction. And also here, just as an example, we can make different scripts, and this will make much more sense later. But in this case, I actually just write a text depending on where we are in the workflow. So here in the bottom, you can see that we have a success handshake, as I call it. So I just write a text saying that this integration went well because this is the last action. So if it failed, it would have failed before this one. And if it fails on its way to this script, then it will go to the abort block and then execute this abort workflow. And then we will write another text saying that this integration was not successful. And the point of that is that then we can transfer this handshake, so to say, this string or text back to Vault, for example, if it's Vault. Now, in this case, we transferred from Vault to PLM, and we wanted to send back this message to the Vault user saying that the integration was successful, because otherwise he will fully rely on the functionality of this, that everything goes right every time. But it could be nice to have an indication in my system that now I triggered the integration and it went well. And yeah, and then of course we have these separate flows for errors. I have another example of that. So let's have a small look at how it looks live when, well, this is a video, but it's the live speed and there's no manipulating with that. So this is how it looks when we work in the workflow. So as you can see here, we can select the actions in the right, and then we can drag and drop these actions around to just make it look visually very nice and very transparent. And each of these actions have some specific settings that we need to set up in order to make it work. So for example, this send email action, we need to set up who is the sender of this email, who's the receiver, and the email template and such. And here we just add another action, creating a new transaction. So this one is pretty interesting, I think. So in the end of a transaction, we can actually create another transaction. And this is how I, in this case, send back this message to Vault. So I receive a transaction from Vault, a data set, but then in the end of the workflow, I also create a new transaction where the target system is Vault. So we turn the workflow around and send a message back. And so this is how we work inside the integrator, how it looks. So now we covered these 4 different features or elements inside the integrator. And the last one is the preparation feature. So this is where we can present the data, and I also have an example of that. So let's have a look at that. So the preparation is a table view, and we still need a transaction to be triggered. Here we find ourselves in Vault, and we trigger the integrator using a right-click menu on an item. And when we head to the integrator here, we have this full list of all the transactions. So you can see the previous 2 transactions, one completed, one in the preparation state. And now this one is processing. But as soon as it's done with the property mapping, then before it goes to the workflow, it will enter this preparation state as we have here. Now we can simply click this transaction, and here we have the full overview of all the data that is going to be transferred to the target system. We use colors to indicate if the data is new. Are we going to update some fields? Are we going to create some fields? Do we have some fields that are being overwritten in a certain way? We can set all that up with some colorizing that are predefined. And for this specific customer, they wanted to use this preparation sheet to fill in some additional data that the Vault user could not fill in. For example, the route template here. So we don't want the Vault user to need to fill this route in, but instead we have a PTA function where they access this sheet and then fill in the needed data. And we of course limit that so they can only edit the fields that we have allowed the user to edit. And as we can see here, when we are satisfied with the preparation sheet, we can push the transaction and finalize it into the target system, in this case, Business Central. So that is what happened here. Yeah. And then, as you can see here, I have kind of bended this straight line of integration. So now we need to talk a little bit about this 2 ways of bidirectional integration. And in my example here, I'm a Vault user, and I need some information coming from PLM and our ERP system. It could also be the CRM system, and I also need some information, of course, inside the PDM system. But I want to present that in a way so I can quickly make my decisions and proceed with my work. And then, of course, in the end, I want to push it to the ERP system. So this is all about accessibility compared to the transferring data. And the first example here is what we call feedback. And feedback is just a term for having this data. We request some data and then we get it back. And the way it looks inside Vault is that we can activate a tab here. So right now I just highlighted an item, a released item in Vault. And then down here we have a specific tab that we have activated as standard in the integrator. And down here you can see we have 3 different areas. One showing some Vault data, because this is the data I want to compare. I, of course, already had access to that data, but now I only see the properties that I need to handle in some way or to consider. And then in the middle, we have some PLM data that might be necessary in order for me to select, do I want this bracket or another, such as the price. Could also be that I need to consider the stock number of this specific component, and that data comes from the ERP system. So here I have set up a view where I can quickly access data from different systems, but only in my native system that I'm used to working in. So I don't have to have a PLM system on one screen and Vault on my second screen and then ERP on my third screen. Yeah, so I think this is a great way of improving the accessibility, and this is also a type of integration. And the way that we are allowed to do that is by using this two-way integration that I briefly showed before by sending this handshake back. So in here, once again, we are in Vault. This is a little bit different example. We have 2 properties on the item here that are not filled in, as you can see, does not have a value yet. And this time we trigger the integrator by changing the state of the item. So now we go from ready to release to released. And if we head into the PLM system, in this case, Fusion Manage, then we can see that the item was transferred successfully. And we will just check out the item, that it includes all the thumbnail and all the properties. As you can see here, that was successfully. And now that we created a new item in the PLM system, we might want to transfer some information about that item back into Vault. And that could be, for example, an ID that allows us to look up data for that item. So now we have actually connected this Vault item to the corresponding PLM item. And we have that connection established, which allows us to use this feedback feature. And also in the workflow for this specific example, I sent back this integration status saying that this integration was successful. So this was a overall presentation of the core features in the integrator and some examples of how we can use it. And then, of course, it's very important also to say a little bit about how do we approach these projects. What do we actually do when we want to introduce the integrator at a customer? And what is very, very important for us is that we put some time and some effort into investigating and planning. So we prioritize the efforts based on what value it brings to you guys. So we don't want to just integrate everything. We want to look at the processes that are mature and well enough for integration, and then also the users. So we have to really respect the users and the business when we look into these integration projects. But most likely you already have some processes that are mature and you have some specific data that you transfer from one place to another, or some data that you know that you can rely on that you want to make accessible in different systems. So these are the steps that we go through, and it's an iterative process. So we don't go from these concept levels 1, 2, 3, one at a time. It's a process, and we don't have to start with everything. We need to start with the most valuable stuff, and yeah, usually that's the way that we approach it. That's it. Then we have some time for some questions if you have any. I can see that René already answered some some
Yeah,
questions? But,
it has been quite busy in the QA, so thank you so much for all the different questions provided. One of the questions were actually in regard to how mature the NTI integrator is. For your knowledge, the NTI integrator have actually existed for plus 18 years. It has been rewritten and redefined several times during that period. It was actually previously called iConnect and mainly provided to companies in Sweden, but today it's used by plus 200 companies worldwide and several thousand users on a daily basis. And that ranges from, say, small companies to enterprise companies within all areas, including the defense and the medical areas. So the NTI integrator is not invented yesterday. It's actually a very mature platform. There was also a question in regard to if that Morten several times mentioned properties, and if properties is to be compared with metadata, and yes, it is. It's just two different terms for the same thing. And I think it's actually important here to mention that Morten actually mentioned several times that we do transactions, and transactions can actually be divided into 3 different categories. So a transaction can consist of article data, like an item or a file that can contain a certain amount of properties or metadata. Could also be structures like bill of materials, or it could be files like PDF, step, native, CAD files, whatever kind of files you could imagine. So these 3 type of data is actually what defines a transaction. There were also questions in regard to if the integrator is only used in combination with the Autodesk platform. And no, we actually have a lot of customers using the integrator without even having any Autodesk products. So if you want to, as an example, there were one asking if it were possible for the integrator to send an email notification if something in regard to a production workflow went wrong. And yes, that is actually a quite common scenario. So the entire integrator doesn't have to be used in combination with Vault or User Manage. It could also just be used between Salesforce, ERP, just like common business systems. And there were also questions in regard to how secure the entire integrator is and how the authentication of users is handled. And the entire integrator has its own user management, but it can as well also support AD and integrations. And because it is actually used by defense and aerospace companies, it is actually validated against regulations like ITAR and CMMC. So it is really secure, and it actually used best practice in regard to security. So what else do we have on the?
Someone just asked if we can connect to several ERP systems, production sites. Yeah, and I just want to say that we can. So one configuration inside the integrator specifies a source system and a target system, but we can set up as many configurations as we want, and then we can trigger these configurations, so to say, the transactions within the configurations. And that is how, for example, I have this transaction going from Vault to PLM, but then back from PLM to Vault. Those are 2 different configurations, but we can set up as many configurations as we want. So, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, we actually have several companies, global companies, that have like one common Vault for all users, but per country they have their own ERP system. So we actually just identify the localization of the user, all the data transacted, and then hand it over to the specific ERP system. in the specific country. So that's quite common for us as well to handle. So and due to the time for this webinar, we are only like scratching the surface. There's a lot more into this, and we would love to present our capabilities. So if you were inspired by this webinar, please reach out to us. We will be more than happy to touch base and hear about your challenges and how give you an example of how we can help you solving that. So with that, I would say thank you so much for everyone for attending this webinar, and looking forward to meet some of you for a demo or to continue the conversation as well. So thank you so much for attending, and
Thank you.